All right, welcome everybody to the June 9th edition of Wine Stay. My name is Zach. I'm the beer and wine coordinator at the Durham Co-op. My pronouns are he and him. Tonight we have John joining us from Cellar Distribution, talking about the Las Jaras Waves wines. So we got these really cool holographic things going on right now. There's a white, rosé, and red. They're all blends. They're all just super cool kid wine, and I'm very excited to have them. As far as just kind of jumping in, a can of wine is a half of a bottle. A lot of times when you see a can, you think of a soda or a LaCroix or something like that you're easily consuming in one serving, where this is quite a bit of wine. I mean, I poured half into a very large glass, and that's a big wine. Big glass that we're going to be enjoying, later this evening after we've sipped some stuff. And so you can get about 2.5 normal wine glasses out of a can of wine, or 2 large glasses out of a can of wine. So when you see it on the shelf, got to kind of keep that in mind, where it's not just like where a bottle of wine is, 750 milliliters. You've got the can is 375. Let's see. Can everybody still hear me? I'm having some connection issues, I think. Okay, great. So tonight, like I said, we got John. He's joining us. We'll be showing some tech sheets. So these are things that the industry people send to me typically, where it kind of gives you a breakdown of what's in the bottle or what's in the can in this case, and lets you explore some of the blends and the winemaking techniques and kind of the who's and what's of what's going on inside the can. As is, kind of the thing here. We're here to drink some wine. We're here to have some fun, hopefully learn some things. So if everybody wants to, kind of cheers, jump right into the white. And John, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. First off, yeah, thanks again for having me come in. I think this is the second Wines Day that I've done. We did one back in March, I think, and I believe it was just the 2 of us. So happy to have some other people coming in here, and we'll have some fun today. So these wines are really exciting. They're really fun. They're some of them, I mean, relatively avant-garde or Nuevo California style wines. These are very, very fun. I'm actually no glass. I'm gonna go straight from can.
Hey.
Because that's how I would typically go to enjoy these, very slowly, albeit because it's, as you said, 2 glasses. My sister-in-law one time made that mistake. She got like 3 of them and took them to a golf course and was like, I don't know why, my back 9 was terrible. I was like, well, yeah, that'll happen if you drink a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So I like these for a lot of reasons. One, portion control on it. My wife and I just had a baby, so we're not, consuming as much wine as we used to. So I'm really enjoying wines in a can because we can just split it and have like a glass of wine with dinner and things like that. But generally wine in a can, for one reason or another, is only okay. Whereas this, I think, is a kind of a turn in a different direction, whereas this is really good wine that happens to be in a can.
Right.
Very exciting wine for sure. So if you want to throw up that tech sheet on the white, there's one thing I really want to get into before we even start with any of the rest. As you did say, they're all blends. I think this has a blend, a pretty cool blend of some fun grapes, to include Barbera from California, which I think is really exciting because that typically is, we're all used to it as red wine. So it's just skinned Barbera, which I think is cool because it adds a lot of texture, a lot of weight to this wine, and it's not just a flimsy, light white wine. So it's a lot of fun. One other thing to notice on all 3 of these, if you've taken a sip of all of them, is that the white and the rosé are still, whereas the red has just a little bit of a zip to it. I wouldn't necessarily, it's not a sparkling wine. It's actually probably closer to like a perlé, which has like really, really, really tiny bubbles, and they're not super prevalent like in champagne. But that's really fun because I just think that makes that wine just really exciting.
So like I said, technical issues earlier. The Zoom meeting on the other computer is doing some thinking right now. So I can read the blend off of the tech sheet while we wait for this thing to boot back up.
Yeah.
Let's
We
see.
can go over the blend, and then, like, I want to talk about the vineyards, the fact that, I want to go what's in this can.
Sure. Here, let's see.
Yeah. So the blend is 60% of Colombard. Yes,
Hey.
there we are. So French Colombard, which is a grape kind of akin to the grapes that you find in Cognac and Armagnac, which is pretty cool. It's a Gouais Blanc and Chenin Blanc, I believe, are the parents.
Yeah.
I'm noticing it so much more in California, though, like especially in these Nouveau style winemakers. And then Chenin Blanc and Barbera. I remember last year the blend was a little bit different. I don't think the Barbera was in there. Yes, Zoom has it on the struggle bus. Absolutely correct there, Abby. I had one earlier or yesterday that was kind of similar. But this wine for me has a lot of tropical fruit. And I think the Colombard really kind of shows through with a lot of that.
Yeah, I think with for Colombard, for me, I usually see it in either Entre du Mer or Côte de Gascon white blends. So, in not just, obviously used for Armagnac and Cognac. They're making wine, they're distilling it, turning it into these lovely things. But you get that tropical, and I really find that, like, kind of in those blends, the Uni Blanc kind of gives it that body, and then the Colombard really gives you that nice kind of tropical punch, which is great, really refreshing. That's what these wines are kind of meant for. Aluminum is pool safe, so throw a koozie. I was hoping that they had rainbow koozies on their website, to slap around this can, but it's easy to take, very portable, very shareable. You'll start to see a lot of alternative packaging instead of just heavy glass with a real cork and a synthetic closure or a capsule on top. You're getting into these kind of more fun packaging, which is part of marketing. There's all of these cans were made by this lady named Jen. You can look her up, Jen Stark. She's got some really, really cool artwork. It's very much like these cans, which I think they probably saw that and then were like, hey, like, you should put this around a can of wine for us. Let's see if we can get that back up.
She also designed the Trousseau Gris and the sparkling wine, I believe. And the Trousseau Gris has like a weird holographic thing. It's really cool. Her wine, or her art's really trippy. Jen Stark, she's awesome. Yeah. Fun follow on Instagram too, if you like looking at, you like scrolling through the timeline and get something that's a little fun and different. Another big thing for Las Jaras is making sure that what's in what the juice is organic. So if it's not organic, it's on the cusp of being certified as. So as you can see on the tech sheet here, we've got Rossetti Vineyard, Testa, and Norgard, which are organic with the exception, obviously, as it says on there, but certified sustainable wine. The French Colombard being dry farmed, also super, super interesting technique that I think is becoming a little bit more prevalent in winemaking that I've seen, at least, and one that I really appreciate. I think that dry farm wines have much more of a concentration of flavor, which is why I think this is such like serious wine inside of this can. So that's really fun. This is also my first time tasting this vintage.
Yeah,
I wanted to come into it clean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Waiting because I knew we were going to be showing them tonight, and figured that while I didn't want to wait to try these wines, I figured I could wait a week or two. The co-op got 10 cases for the white because we did so incredibly well with it last year. We're down to about, I think, 5 cases left. So just as a kind of shelf item, obviously we knew this was coming up, which is exciting. But just trying to get these out there. Another cool thing about this is price point, where a normal bottle of the kind of standard Las Jaras wine called Glue Glue, which is meant to be chilled and literally glugged or gulped, is like, these are less than half the cost, and you're still getting half of a bottle of wine. So you know, it's all about perspective, especially when it comes to canned wine, and that's another thing. And as far as dry farming, what John was meaning, dry farming is where they aren't using any irrigation to support the vines. It's just the water that is, you know, naturally there, whether it's rainfall or, you know, creek runoff. They're not purposely adding water to the vineyards, which then makes the grapes struggle, which then, as John mentioned, really concentrates the flavors, because the grapes are trying to make the best grapes they can. Where if they have easy access to water, then they're going to produce a whole bunch of grapes because they can, versus just kind of concentrating all of their energy into, you know, less yield, smaller bunches, just really flavorful grapes.
This one's, I think it's better this year than last year. And I thought last year was, you know, pretty unassailable. I think the winemaking on this is really interesting and really cool. Obviously, we just hit on the farming and stuff like that. It being older vines and stuff is really cool. I believe that some of the Colombard goes into oak. Other than that, it's in amphora and concrete eggs. So just like, it's just so clean. Last year, I thought was a little bit more tropical on the palate rather than just the nose. Whereas this year, I think it's so high line of acidity. It just, I mean, my mouth is like watering just, and I just took my last sip like a minute and a half ago, and I'm still tasting it, which is not something I usually expect from a can. So it's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, and you were mentioning the fact that they're using Barbera in here too, and the wine is still, you know, crystal clear for the most part. You know, that Barbera is a red grape, as John was mentioning. When they make white wines out of red grapes, they're squishing the juice out and then removing the skin. So that's where a lot of the color, there's only 2 or 3 red fleshed grapes, where most of them are red, like red grapes are just on the skins versus the actual flesh of the grape. You'll see some of those eventually during one of our wine stays. But it's just a neat thing. I mean, these guys are really, like John was saying, avant-garde, like really pushing the cusp of like, what is wine, what is what's considered like natural wine. I've personally tried to start to say low intervention, because these guys are making really cool wine and using techniques that are way older than what we've been seeing in the last 80 years. You know, they're really kind of letting the grapes be their best. You know, they're using neutral oak for texture. They're using amphorae for that kind of just classic approach. You know, amphorae is these big clay vessels that they used to put in the bottom of ships to transport wine, oil, fish sauce, whatever it is, like back in the Roman times. And the winemakers are kind of rediscovering how wine was made, you know, a millennia ago, and now applying that with still using, you know, modern winemaking techniques, but letting the grapes kind of speak for themselves and using the, you know, the produce to then make really great wines. Are there any questions about the white before we move on to the rosé? Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay. What percentage of the vineyards, of all of the vineyards, do you think are dry vineyards?
You mean like
this wine specifically?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You mean like
wine specifically? Sorry.
It was hard to hear you. I mean, in all of the vineyard, I mean, is dry winemaking common? I've never heard of it.
So it's not super common. There are more vineyard managers that are going to that, especially now when a lot of wine or water has like chemicals and stuff in it, and they want to maintain like the most pristine style vineyards, or in certain areas where using like non-distilled water or something like that can actually cancel out their organic certifications and stuff. It's starting to become a little bit more prevalent. Like I have one that I work with in Spain that catches water in concrete vats and uses it when it gets dry. And they're in a desert climate, so they only get like 20 or something days of rain. So they're collecting it and using it to irrigate by hand that way. As far as like, a percentage of worldwide vineyards, I don't know, but I would definitely venture to say that it is a very small amount. There are some areas of the world where it's a little bit more common, like especially on the Iberian Peninsula, like Spain and Portugal do that relatively often. There are some vineyards in California that are doing that. And once again, these are very Nouveau style winemakers that are doing it. But it is not the most common thing in the world. In fact, I think there's even like a wine subscription service called like Dry Farm that it's a little bit of a gimmicky thing, and the wine is actually I've tasted it. It's not great, and it's more of like if you taste or if you drink this wine, you won't get a headache, and the reason is because of the Dry Farm, which is, by the way, a complete falsity, and they're just trying to like have some, I don't even know what they're trying to do, but it's not effective. But dry farming is not a super widely practiced vineyard management tool.
Yeah, we would have to look up laws as far as what irrigation is even allowed, but that's usually defined by region. There's some classic things that you can only water for the certain, like the first 100 days or whatever. Like there's a bunch of weird things. There's some people do drip irrigation, so they like run tubes and have little holes and slowly drip water onto the vines. Some folks, especially in South America, do flood irrigation. So they literally flood the entire vineyard one time, and that's all the water that they get. It's all the grapes. That's, here you go, here's your allotment, and then hopefully produce some really good grapes. So go ahead, Ed. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah. John, you refer to this as nouveau style winemakers, so are these literally new winemakers, and how would the other wine industry look down at, or not look down, but maybe for those who are producing wines in cans, especially the French industry, perhaps?
So I think it was 2018. There's a wine writer named John Bond, who I believe wrote a book called like Nouveau California. And it is a relatively new thing. So we're talking about new winemakers in some cases. Some people have been doing it longer, but basically kind of taking back the winemaking style, especially in California. So you've got like, it's just another name for natural winemakers pretty much. But I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s. And I can't remember the name of him. It's Tarchevsky or something like that. Started, and I believe he was at not Gergich Hills, but another one in Napa. Started actually like adding like wood chips and stuff to the barrels. And since that happened, that's when like Chardonnay became this oaky, buttery thing, and especially in California, and then like the whole ABC movement. So like, there's a lot of things that kind of, I don't want to say like put a bad name on, especially California winemaking, but made the association just the bland association of like everything from California is high alcohol, heavy fruit, lots of oak, which in reality and historically it's not. It's all like what certain winemakers were doing. And these nouveau winemakers are doing limited intervention wines, really letting the vineyard management and the actual grapes really shine through and speak for themselves, rather than let's see if we can't get this up to a certain percentage of alcohol or a certain style or whatever. It's just very, very hands-off. Internationally, there are a lot of winemakers who are doing that as well. And something back that Zach was saying, a a lot of regions also kind of require you to do some of that hands off. Like, I don't know of anybody in Catalonia who like over manipulates anything. I don't think they're legally allowed to over manipulate anything. So when I say Nouveau California, I'm specifically referencing this John Bonn wine writer, and it's Bonne, JONBONNE. Really fun book. Also distills it down on some articles online that you can read. Kind of explains it a little bit better, but it's just really low intervention winemakers. Some of which are new winemakers, some of which are, have been doing it and kind of just changed their practice. If that answers your question.
No, I think that did pretty well. I also think of this is the new fashion of wine versus much like Barolo used to be a totally different wine. And then in the 70s or 80s, they started making it more like French Bordeaux or make it more like California Cab, where they started to stylistically change the wine into, something that their parents were like, what are you doing? Same thing with Amarone. Amarone used to be a sweet wine. And then one time it over fermented and they lost all their sugar, and then they tasted it and they were like, holy cow, this is fantastic. And, that was the 50s. So it's really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but, these are kind of the new cutting edge, if you will, of winemaking styles and practices that are kind of, more old school than new school. Like they're not, adjunct, they're not adding sugars, they're not adding acid, they're not, tinkering with other chemicals or additives. They're just, like John said, letting it shine through, letting it be the grape and not vinegar. That's where the winemaking comes in. And just really kind of letting the ground and the grapes, and then through all of that, the winemaker kind of speak with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Did that answer?
Yeah, it's nouveau, but it's really not nouveau at all. It's like, oh, Ed, you got to unmute yourself there.
All right.
Still wine in cans. That's another question that is that being generally accepted?
Yes.
I think that's the first part of the question.
Yes.
You did.
The first part of the question. The fact that wine in a can is being more and more accepted. So for me, yeah, like we sell probably 3 cases of canned wine a week at the co-op, partly for, like John said, portion control, partly for the ease of transportation. You don't have to have a corkscrew. You don't have to have a glass. They're pool friendly, park friendly, for packing and camping. It's a lot easier to bring a can of wine and squish it down and bring it back out with you than it is to figure out how to, take a corkscrew, open a bottle of wine, then also take your glass back out with you, when you could bring 3 cans or 4 cans and have more wine for kind of less weight, which is, especially when camping, that's an important thing. We're also seeing styles of wine. We're seeing more wine spritzers. We're seeing canned cocktails, which are wine based. We're seeing a lot of things towards this format. Wine bottles are not going away. I doubt that we'll ever see wine bottles kind of exit the scene, but we're definitely seeing a new push into other packaging, whether it's Tetra Pak, whether it's cans, whether it's bag and box. I think they're even doing, I've had just bags, like not even a bag and box, but just a bag of wine that you can, hang from a tree in your backyard and, enjoy yourself. So there's interesting things going. And, we even have like kind of clay hand formed bottles. So it kind of all over the spot, but.
Yeah, we actually have Bridge Lane out of New York. Their winery that's basically, they're on the North Fork of Long Island, I believe. Yeah, North. They do bottle, box, can, and keg, and the kegs are actually disposable. So
nice.
It's just like, yeah, they're just making it so that it's not like aluminum or or anything like that. So I mean, conceivably, I guess then just cart that thing out to wherever. And I mean, it's just to answer your other question, Ed, is it becoming more acceptable? It is if it's good. Canned wine, I think, can be accepted if it's good. It definitely is a trend that's picking up a lot of steam right now. And the wines that are going into cans now are exponentially better than they were, or like, a couple of years ago when it was pretty tough to get anything that was really like artisanal or handmade like these are. And you were just kind of getting like, hey, well, we got some extra wine, let's throw them in some cans and see if we can sell them to people at pools and whatnot. So now they're like really making wines. Like these are all wines that aren't going into bottle. They wanted to put them in cans because they thought they had a good product and could really kind of progress what canned wine can be. So a good trend, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump into this.
But my new wine cellar, won't look the same with cans in it.
That is true.
Feel it's smaller. Yeah, more compact. So this rosé, once again, I think it's just really nice. A lot of texture on this. Zin, Petite Sirah, and I'm missing one varietal.
Carignan.
Oh yeah, of course. It's Las Jaras. I should have known it was Carignan. So what really jumps out to me is two of those three grapes, the Zin and the Petite Sirah, which make up like 88% of this, are grapes usually yielding really, really big red wines. And why I think that's interesting is that rosé, there's a lot of different styles, obviously, but I think what they really wanted was something with a lot of acidity, but also that has a lot of texture and a lot of fruit. And this is super fruity, but also really, really lean at the same time. Like, I think they've achieved something really nice here. Venturi Vineyard for the Zin, Petite Sirah and Carignan, all dry farmed, all organic. That's a really killer vineyard. I don't know if I've tasted a lot of wines from the Venturi Vineyard that I did not like. And one note that they put down here at the bottom was 2020 with smoke taint.
Right.
I don't discern any on this one, and I have on a lot of wines of 2020 vintages. You haven't tried any of those because I'm not bringing them to you because they're smoky.
Thank you.
No. But I don't really discern too much smoke on this.
No, well, if when we get to the winemaking, they actually, and I don't know if it's as prevalently documented in the rosé, but in the red tech sheet, they talk about how they kind of almost like reinvented a way to do carbonic maceration, which you find a lot in Beaujolais, especially Beaujolais Nouveau. And they've kind of pressed the juice off, and then they are carbonically macerating outside of the grape. And so carbonic maceration is basically a really quick way to ferment, almost like on a micro scale. So instead of pressing the juice, adding yeast, or propagating yeast naturally, and then letting the wine ferment, you're fermenting it inside of the individual grapes. So it typically has like a fruity kind of almost bubble gumminess to it. It can have some spritz, and just like really young and fresh and alive is typically how it's sold. I think the red, now granted, I've let the red kind of gas off for the last half hour, but when you were mentioning the sparkles earlier, I think it's gonna kind of lead you more into that realm versus like a really full-bodied kind of clunky red. The carbonation gives it a little more lightness when it's 95 degrees out, and you still want to drink red wine. But really, this is great. I'm a fan of rosés anyway, but this, like, just that little bit of almost tannin that it has, that texture you were referring to, is not only kind of atypical, but really, really tasty.
Well, I appreciate when producers will make a rosé in this style. And another way to kind of mention this is, like, a lot of rosé is generally just used as it's an aperitif. It's just something to sip on, yada yada, all that stuff. But the weight, the texture, the acidity, the fruit of this really, I mean, I think that this could be something that goes on your table, you know, with food, like something that stands up to food, which I think is, a lot of people just don't discern that with rosé. It's kind of like, it's its own category. Oh, this is just for fun. This isn't big serious wine or whatever. But I definitely think this is a rosé that you can do food with. Like, you know, I mean, obviously you'd probably want to stick with foods that kind of go in the style of what these are meant for. But at the same time, like, you know, this could stand up to, you know, your hamburger and hot dog family get together type thing.
Even with, like, I think some smoky stuff, you can't taste the smoke taint in this wine, but I think with something grilled, that this is still bold enough to handle that. And I'm happy. I don't know how everybody else feels, but you know, especially pouring out of a can, which we've talked about in depth tonight. You know, if you can get something like this out of a can, then there's definitely a lot of possibility for that format in the future.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I like this one. I mean, so all of these vineyards are dry farmed. So, you know, I mentioned that not everything, or not a lot of vineyards are, but I guess they're really going for that at Las Jaras. But once again, I think it's just all of that concentration of flavor. Like, and that's why this is such a bombastic rosé. Like, it's just so assertive. Just a lot of fun. I really, sorry, I'm getting a weird question. But yeah, I think this one's just, I'm very excited that I have like 3 more cans of this later.
Right. Yeah. It almost reminds me of almost like Ramato or Rosato from Italy too, where they're purposely, or even like Rioja rosés, where it has a lot more color, and you kind of look at it and you're almost expecting it to be just a fruit bomb. You're just expecting like kind of almost heavy, but with winemaking and with, you know, timing your harvest to preserve both sugar and acidity, which we've talked about in previous wine stays, like reading the tech notes and seeing that they, you know, purposely chose not to destem because they wanted that color, or they wanted that texture. You know, that's where good winemaking and, you know, thoughtfulness comes in. They're not just making a product; they're really kind of focusing on letting, you know, what they're producing speak for itself. You know, fun, funky labels kind of help that project from now, you know, every now and again. But I think just really tasty stuff.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about the rosé? I know we did that one kind of quick, but it's pretty delicious. So it goes away pretty quick, this one. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Can you buy these same wines in the bottle from the same vineyard?
From the vineyards, you can find wines in bottles, but this is not
the
in
vineyards.
bottles.
You can find wines in bottles, but this is not in bottles.
There we go. Yeah, so they make a lot of rosé. They make a lot of red. They make a little bit of white. I don't have any white besides the Waves right now. But yeah, this is the project. I mean, this is how they have decided to sell this wine. John, you were saying that you can get, like, at the winery, you can get other formats, or is it like
No,
only-
so he said vineyard specifically, so I was just saying, like, you know, from Venturi and Rossetti and all those other vineyards, there are bottles from other wineries and stuff like that, but from Las Jaras, no, these are only available in can. They do have some bottled wines from like a lot of the wine from the Glue and Sweetberry come from Venturi and Rossetti. So like there is stuff, you know, available in bottle, but of this specific, no, just in cans here.
Yeah, and they chose to do that. You know, stylistically, these wines are summertime wines. You know, if you go to their website, they have a pool party pack, which is, you know, 12 cans or 6 cans that are meant to be just enjoyed outside. And in the heat of the California sun, which is where these guys are based. And we have we have 2 rosés right now, and we've got 2 of their still reds, and they're even quite a bit different than what we're pouring here. And that, again, that's what they're going for. We've had a 6 bottles total of some really awesome like single vineyard or AVA listed Pinot Noir, which I have a bottle on my wine rack somewhere that is definitely not an everyday kind of wine. Just the rarity alone. I mean, North Carolina got what, 6 cases total or something like that, John?
3.
Yeah, 3. Yeah, 3. So it's not exactly easy to find. I mean, these are 1,500 case production, which in the grand scheme of things is quite small. And that's kind of the idea. That's why we got 10 cases in, because it's just cool stuff. I think it might be time to jump to the red wine.
Yeah. You said yours gassed off. I am just opening it now, so I'm going straight in for the spritz.
It's still got, I can hear it. So, it'll be spritzy right out of the can like that.
I get you. So one thing I think is, we talk about the spritz, we talk about all that stuff. I think the number 1 rule for wine out of a can is it has to be refreshing. So I think that spritz really helps with this. Like, I don't want big Napa Cabernet or Bordeaux out of a can, or Amarone out of a can.
Yeah, I do want Amarone.
You do?
I do want Amarone out of a can. Just because buy half a bottle of Amarone. And
that's true. Okay. I see your point. Yeah, I get you there. But like, I think that it needs to be something. It's got to be refreshing. And I think that little bit of spritz. I mean, this is a 13.5% alcohol can. It's pretty big. I mean, it's Zin Petite Sirah, so like those are big, full body varietals. Obviously, this is a little leaner because of the winemaking style on it, but a little bit of spritz just really makes this so drinkable and easy, and kind of just. I mean, I like this a little bit chilled still, as with all other Las Jaras wines. But yeah, this to me is super refreshing, even if it is big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point, a lot of wine in the States, and we've talked about this before, we drink it too warm. Our room temperature here is 72 degrees. Cellar temperature is closer to high 50s or low 60s. These wines definitely benefit, or at least maybe not benefit, but it doesn't hurt them at all to throw it into the fridge for 30 minutes. The kind of thing, throw it into your fridge. If you're cooking on the grill, by the time your food is done on the grill, your wine should be cold enough. Or if you got a little bit of time, kind of knocks it down a little bit, really kind of softens it on the palate too. I think the carbonation would shine a little more if mine was, more in that, 60-degree range versus the 70-degree range it is right now. But you can also see, like, you could drink this with even a hard chill on it, even in like that 40-degree at the pool, and be refreshed. And I think it's a really good point that you made, John, where if you're going to open something like this stylistically, that's perfect. That's what you're looking for, is refreshment versus being overwhelmed by a big, like, sticky thing. And typically these varietals, Zinfandel and Petite Sirah, are big, bold, juicy. You think of Lodi, you think of these huge glasses of wine that are thick and dense and really dark. And you look at this and you can practically see through it. It's just nice and almost thin, but in a really, really good way. And here's what I was talking about earlier, about how they handled smoke taint. So they, using classic things. So again, taking these kind of old world ways and old school ways to make wine, and then putting them to use in a more modern way. So kind of see, if you want to read this, I'll leave it on the screen for a little bit so you can you can read. And they're also very conscious about their use of sulfur. Sulfur helps kind of stop acetobacter, so the bacteria that turns wine into vinegar. So it's a kind of a good thing to use in certain kinds of winemaking, but they're using just a very small amount. And that's just to kind of help kind of stabilize the wine. But 10 parts per million is like, what, 30 times less than what the standard addition of sulfur would be.
Yeah, when they're gonna put and tell you that they're using 10 parts per million, that's a pretty small amount, because if you go to not to disparage any other wineries, but let's just say some other wineries in California, you won't find anything about how much sulfur they add, because they don't want you to know that it's a lot more. Yeah, a lot more. But this one, I'm getting a lot of like big juicy red fruit, dark chocolate, which out of a can is not something that I necessarily would expect. It's very warm. I think this is a pretty versatile wine. Like, I like this in the summer, obviously for its leanness and everything like that, but like there's a warmth to this wine still that reminds you that you are drinking a red wine and not just a rosé or a white or anything like that. Like, there's some weight and some heft to this wine, and this chocolate note is what's really, really prevalent for me. Like, I'm getting a lot of like pomegranate and dark cherry and almost like some dried purple fruits, dried plums, stuff like that, and everything is just kind of enveloped in this super dark chocolate thing for me right now. I'm not sure what your taste is, Zach, but like that's for me, that's what I'm getting a lot of.
Yeah, I like that really well. I definitely get those kind of tart red fruits. This wine has quite a bit of acidity. The addition of that little bit of carbon dioxide also will help kind of add to that feel. You can almost feel like your tongue kind of sweating after you swallow, like the carry through or the follow, the lingering flavors of this wine are not what you would expect out of a can typically. It's what you would expect from Las Jaras, which is why we are showing off these wines, but it's not necessarily what you would expect to pour. You open a can of red wine, you're expecting some like thick sludge almost, and then you get this like light and effervescent and very spring and summer like thing. I think the chocolate note, I'm getting more of that like cocoa, not like a candy bar, but like the way that when you open up your Dutch chocolate to make some brownies or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that could, I definitely don't get any smoke, which I think is really neat that they're talking about that in this tech sheet.
Yeah.
Using winemaking to still salvage fruit that would, like they said, literally rot on the vine. It's cheaper for them to leave it and let it just kind of go to waste than to try to do anything for it. And using really innovative techniques has produced some pretty cool wine.
Yeah, it's definitely that Dutch chocolate. I actually used to, when I was a kid, I used to keep Dutch chocolate under my bed and eat it thinking it was candy. I'm like, I found these candy bars, and I would eat it and I'd be like, this is terrible. I hate this. But I'm definitely, it's bringing back that memory of that for me right now. When you said that, I was just like, oh man, I flashed back to being like 8 years old, thinking I had pulled one over on my parents.
You get like a baker's bar that's like this big and like that thick.
Yeah, I'm like,
I
kept on it.
I didn't hide it under my bed necessarily, but every time we would open vanilla extract, I wanted to like taste it because it smells so amazing, like it's floral, vanilla, like all these like, exotic flavors that you don't necessarily, you're not open up your little, jar of vanilla every once in a while. And you taste it and it's just, 80% alcohol and bitter and just not, how does something that smells so great taste so horrible? I don't think this wine does that. I think this wine smells great and tastes great. Great. Are there any questions about the red wine?
can you age wine in cans at all versus a bottle?
I don't think stylistically these wines are made to age. They are vintaged, which is a plus in their favor. And I think it would be interesting to hold a can back for a year. But within a bottle, especially with natural cork, there is some oxygen exchange. There is some development that happens. I'm sure that something would happen if, we could, kind of travel through time for 5 years and then taste this wine. I'm sure something would be different, but I don't think the longevity is there. It's not really the idea behind these wines either. It's more of like fun, crack it open. You don't want a beer, you don't want another White Claw or whatever. Like, you can have this really kind of cool and still very accessible wine in that same kind of format. We might squirrel away a couple cans and do a test next year when the new Waves comes out and see if we can tell a difference with the vintage change.
I can tell you that I have some of last year's Companion Skin Contact.
Okay.
And I tasted it next to this year's Companion Skin Contact. Relatively the same.
Okay.
Relatively the same, but it's kind of like with a New Zealander that I work with who makes Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand under Stelvin's Screw Cap.
Mm-hmm.
We did a little tasting going back to his first vintage in 2014, and they were all they all drank really, really fresh. So I wonder if wine in a can would do that. But the only reason that I even had this can of Skin Contact is that I found out in my wine area back here that I just like had one and was like, oh, this is fun, cool, let's try it out. Relatively similar, but I don't think there would be any added benefit of aging it. Just because you can do it and it might still be fresh. I mean, it might still taste similar is one thing, but you're not going to get the same result that you would out of aging, Burgundy or something like that, where you're looking for that concentration or tertiary notes to develop or anything. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing it, but yeah, it could be fun.
Yeah, I think the one thing that could be fun is because it does preserve the freshness, and that because it's very encapsulated in a can. There's no oxygen. There's no there's nothing really going on in there. It's kind of fairly inert. You could see how vintage to vintage, if the winemaker was making it stylistically the same, you could have a direct comparison of a kind of fresh vintage. Compare 19 to 20 and not have the necessarily the aging that would occur in a regular bottle. So that could be cool, but not necessarily. You're not gonna hopefully not find a 2010 can of wine and open it and it magically be fantastic. It could be, who knows? But I think we're in the last couple of years, we're really kind of coming into our own as far as what canned wines can offer. The co-op we have mainly bubble products in cans. We do have a few red wines, but with the exception of the Waves. But it's more about just fresh and light and springy and travel and pool and all that kind of stuff versus throwing it on your rack and letting it hang out until you have a special occasion or something like that. And if you want to be a guinea pig for us, I'm more than happy to help facilitate that. If you want to throw some cans in the PVC pipes. All right. Yeah. Great. Well, if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll wrap up this edition of Wednesday. Yeah. Okay. This edition of Wednesday. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I have one last question. Is there, do you think, a stratification of ages? Being an older couple, we're wondering, do you think that younger people will really be excited about wine in cans, and perhaps older people will look down their noses at it?
Yes and no. I think that's my job, is to educate folks and to get them to like trust me and trust that, you know, we're representing products that not only taste good but that we believe in. I think the same question could be asked for bottled beer. And we see, if you look at the case of the co-op, we have about, I'd say, 20 beers in a bottle and 300 beers in a can. I think, you know, things have shifted. Packaging has changed tremendously in the last 30 years, where, you know, the beer that I had when I was 5 years old, stealing out of my dad's Budweiser, was a tin can, and it had a flavor to it. You know, you could taste the beer can when you were drinking those beers. And now we've got non-BPA liners, and it's, you know, a very like inert substance that you're basically just storing it in, and there's no flavor profile or contact with the packaging. Where in beer, you know, you can kind of taste the can, where bottles, you know, in general, were kind of like the classy way to go. And now we're seeing most breweries just do cans. There's not that kind of hiccup with like, oh, we need to put it into a bottle. We're seeing them just do all cans all the time, or converting from bottles to cans. Cans are almost infinitely recyclable, where bottles take a lot more energy. Bottles also weigh a lot more. So it takes just more fuel to get from point A to point B. Same thing with kegs, both keg wine and keg beer. You're getting a really, really large amount of product at one time, you know, 15 gallons of beer at a time, or 12 and a half gallons of wine, or whatever the normal size is. So you're seeing these kind of shifts in packaging. And I think some of it's environmental based, some of it is, you know, all the accessibility based. You know, as far as bottles, I don't foresee wine bottles ever going out of fashion. I mean, the same thing with bottles of spirits. I don't think you're gonna find a, you know, can of Jack Daniels one day. I hope that you do not find a can of Jack Daniels one day. But
everyone's safety. I hope you don't.
Exactly. But it's all about kind of not even a modern approach, but just kind of a changing in use. And we're seeing people, you know, sharing a can of wine versus opening a bottle. You know, there is some majesty, and there is some, you know, like, what is it? Like excitement in opening a bottle of wine. You know, there's some, like when you cut the foil and you screw the worm in and you pop the cork, and that sound, and there's some romance, you know, that is involved in wine. That's why we love it so much. That's why we talk about it, you know, every 2 weeks for an hour. But I don't think that we're going to see, I don't think we're going to see a shift either way. I think there's going to be more wine in cans, but I definitely don't see there being less wine in bottles. Same thing with bag and box, same thing with Tetra Pak, same, you know, the other formats of wine. I don't think they're going away. I think there's just kind of shifting on, you know, kind of modern standards and what's going on. Of course.
Yeah. Agree with that.
Cool.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining. You know, this is a fun. We did 3 wines tonight. We usually don't have enough time to kind of power through, but thank you for the applause, Abby. You know, we have a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining. This wraps up this edition of Wine Stay. The next Wine Stay is in 2 weeks. So what is that? June 23rd. We're gonna have some new wines to the co-op that are showing up in the next couple of days or so, and you'll start to see them on the shelves, and you'll find more. There's a new sign also at the co-op above the cheese case that all of the Wednesday wines are located at, and we're gonna be having a new kind of new to the co-op cheese plate that we'll be talking about during wine stays. I think that's gonna launch in the next like month or so. We're gonna give Josh, our awesome cheesemonger, some time to kind of catch up, and we're gonna be doing some new things. A personal note, Abby and I like to do cheese night every night after Wednesday. So I'm personally looking forward to a nice like new to the co-op plate, and I think it'll be an exciting way to check new stuff out, much like Wednesday. So thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.